Well, folks, thanks so much for everybody for being here. Just as a very quick point of order, I know some of you are here for our working committee meeting at 2:30, but just know that these first 30 minutes have nothing to do with that working committee. And while I'm assuming all of you are here, so we're going to have a Zoom presentation for the first 30 minutes. Y'all come in, find a seat, but at the same time, the two are totally unrelated. I could only be at the Capitol today, so we're handling two meetings on one day. It'll be via Zoom. So feel free to come and go as you please. When they're done at 2:30, then we'll start our next one. So as soon as I figure out if we are live on Zoom. Michael, are you on Zoom with us?
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming you can hear us okay, so.
Yes, sir. Hear you fine and see you.
Well, there are 4 House members here and soon to be a fifth. And we also have some folks in the audience for our next meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and we will be all ears and we'll try to interject with questions when appropriate.
Certainly. Thank you for having us today. The gist of our interest is discussing how to touch learning loss in early literacy and early mathematics, given the past few years. We have some data that we can share with you, and also some information on what we've done in other states and how other states have set up similar programs. The one thing that I want to be clear about out front, this is not something that would benefit just our company. We're not interested in that. Obviously, we are really more of a proponent of a grant type program that school districts can access and use whatever product they deem necessary that fits their profile locally. And our issue today really is to just explain what we think some of the issues are and what some other states are doing to address them. And I'll get into that quickly if that's acceptable. There are approximately 1.7 million public school students in Georgia. Around 750,000 approximately are elementary students. As of May of 2022, 37% of fourth graders are reading below the national average of achievement. It's our view school districts in Georgia need comprehensive language and literacy intervention resources for elementary students, especially pre-K through third grade. Our company at Imagine Learning provides, we are not operators of schools. We do not compete. We do not recruit students from school. We are a curriculum provider of multiple types of curriculum, mainly for the K-12 space around the country. And we'll serve a class of some sort to almost 10 million students every day. And I believe we are currently working with 90% approximately of the school districts in Georgia, from rural districts to the large urban districts of all sizes. So as we walk through this today, I think the main thing we want to get across is we're very familiar with your state. We're very familiar with the school districts and the students that make up those school districts, and we think we have a really good insight on how to assist for the early literacy in reading and math. So that's the basis of where we are. To go back to what I was saying earlier about the pre-K through third grade, and I'll follow up and get all this data to you after today. After this first 20-30 minutes, and you guys can have access to this And obviously, we're happy to provide any information and serve as a resource for you through the fall and into your session in the spring. We believe the best tools to address this pre-K to third grade, whether it's reading or math, are adaptive, and they create unique computer-based curriculum for each student that is individualized. And what that means is, and there are many companies that do this, again, this is not unique to the industry, but it is unique, I believe, in the approach that you need to take for Georgia students. And when I say based on his or her needs, meaning everything is adapted to the student, meaning I learn differently than probably everybody on this presentation learns. So if you have 300 people watching, everybody has a different need. So based on that, the tools and curriculum and reporting and parent involvement and all of the things that are provided need to be customized for each individual student. And that's certainly how we currently address the Georgia school districts and the students that we already work with. Georgia is moving towards an assessment product called NWEA, which is a nationally known nonprofit assessment firm. We integrate all of our tools, and many school districts in Georgia are using this. So there's already a tight integration between a lot of our curriculum and the assessment that the Georgia school districts are using. The assessment product is not affiliated with our company in any way, shape, or form. I think it's also very important that these resources are developed using the science of reading framework. And it has a proven track record of increasing growth in reading. There are many states in the last year, in the 2022 sessions, and when I say many states, I try to use states that have a similar demographic to the students in Georgia. I'll give you for instance, in Virginia this year, there is a new a law that you must use any reading programs that have to be used that are based using the science of reading framework. So that's a very key thing, and is probably the top phonemic awareness and phonics use science-based product that exists in the marketplace. So science of reading is not a product, but it is a study of how those products work for students around the key phonemic awareness pieces. And so that would be, phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, those kinds of things. The intervention resources should also differentiate instruction and be accessible by all learners, regardless of their demographic or socioeconomic standing, meaning the products need to be adaptable to any type of student, wherever that student may be, whether it's during the day in a library that they can access, or if they have the ability to do that from home. And we're also big proponents, obviously, of providing the curriculum with reporting that not only the teacher and the school district can use, but also giving parents access all along the way so they can follow their child's progress and also see where they may or may not need help and how they may be able to go do that. So we have multiple studies around that, around these products that we're happy to provide at some point. We have multiple use cases. I think we could probably bring in multiple Georgia school superintendents if your group had a hearing in the fall or whenever. That would be happy to kind of talk about what we're discussing today. And then it really kind of comes down to, how do you fund this? And I'll give you some examples of some other states that are pretty diverse meaning diverse geographically and where they're located in the country. Right next door to you in Alabama, they've had a long-standing grant program that is allocated to the Department of Education, and companies qualify to be in that program. So a company like ours would submit resources and data, and here's what we do. And other companies that are competitors of ours would do the same thing. The DOE would pick between that group. School districts would apply for the grants. We do not apply. We're not involved in that process. The school district applies for the grant based on their local needs, and the grants are capped. They generally go out in around $50,000 to $100,000 kind of increments, so it's not a ton of money per district, depending on the size. And the districts decide how to use that money and then how to implement whatever issue they have. So that's a true grant program. In Oklahoma, for instance, they do a very similar process for reading and math for pre-K through 3 on how they're allocated funds to school districts. Again, the districts apply, and the DOE manages that process and sends the money out. We have a very similar setup in Michigan. That one is a little bit bigger than the Oklahoma fund, only because of the number of students. So in Michigan, very similar. Again, all these are either K3 or pre-K3 or pre-K5, depending on their state. A long history of Utah has a long history of doing this very thing, as does Pennsylvania. So tons of states to get you information should you guys have interest in pursuing something like this. Tons of precedent, tons of data on how it works and how the best use is put to test. But it's certainly, and then most importantly, above everything else, student results on what happens if this money truly gets allocated to a school district, and how are the students performing. And I think in today's world, getting back to a math and reading fundamental at K3 and providing those tools for children and allowing them to truly read on grade level by grade 3, hopefully, and then being able to do mathematics on grade level is truly a life-changing experience for a lot of these kids. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you guys have a lot of agenda items today, but that's generally our view on the early pre-K to 3 early literacy and early mathematics intervention for really getting students over this learning loss hump over the last 2 years and getting back to a level that and hopefully exceeding the level pre-pandemic. I will tell you also that we have been at this since the late 90s. The pandemic exacerbated sort of a lot of issues, but I do want to say there is a huge difference between digital curriculum and how it's delivered, and a lot of things that people would talk about over the last two and a half years of remote learning. So digital curriculum is built to provide in a digital format to a student population using a teacher or a classroom professional to assist in the delivery of the products, but it's delivered in a digital manner. The remote learning definition was really designed around using traditional print materials in a traditional classroom where you may have had a teacher speaking or teaching online when kids were at home. And you may have had, 20 to 25 to 30 children online with a parent. And in the early grade levels, we just don't believe that works well. That was not using Zoom as we're doing today. That was not necessarily a good use of that pre-K to grade 3 to 5 students. So using truly built for digital environment materials that are vetted and meet this Georgia standards is a totally different way of doing this than you've probably seen over the last 2.5 years. And again, as I said earlier, we already work with almost 90% of the school districts in some capacity, some very small, some very large installations. So I think our ability, it provides a unique insight that we have into the school districts that we already work with, and some of these districts we've been working with for a decade. So very familiar with your state. We have multiple people living in the state, and we've made a big investment there on how we sell and train and provide these services to school districts. So really want to reiterate, though, the main thing that we look at for achievement is how students perform once they start using these digital intervention products in reading and math. And the proof is in the pudding. If kids perform, it works. And we have a long track record of being able to do that. And I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any more details after today that you guys are more than happy to review. One thing we always do, I can, if you, depending on where you're all representing from, I'll send you a list to the chairman, and you can provide the list of our customers. We don't want to set up some dog and pony where you guys walk in and, oh, it's great, everybody's happy. We'll give you a list of districts, and you walk in on your own and see how it's used. I would encourage you to do that. I think you'd be surprised at the level of usage and the professionalism of how they're trained and the involvement of the students. I think it's pretty impressive, especially if it's not some canned presentation where it almost looks fake. So I'll get you that information, and feel free to take advantage of that. I'm quite sure that we have some school districts in almost everybody's represented areas. I'm positive of that.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. And a couple of data points that I want to follow up with you afterwards to get, but you mentioned early on that 37% of fourth graders are not reading on grade level. Is that a Georgia number or a U.S. number?
That is a Georgia number.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you guys are serving an average of 10 million students a day. And obviously that's across the country.
That's across the country, correct. And in Georgia, there are a total of 1.7 million approximately public school students, and about 750,000 are elementary age students, which we would be talking here, in this early literacy math. So grades pre-K to 3 to 5, depending on the program.
We have a literacy study committee that will be coming up, and I know that there's more conversation for you and I to have around that. But in maybe 60 seconds, what have you all found with your early intervention products that is helping to lower that 37% number, and where are you finding those successes?
I'll give you a couple of answers around that. The Dibbles assessment, which is generally what is used on the reading side, we have. I can get you some data. This won't really. The context of it sounds a little strange in this, but we have results around kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, a third-party study around 1,500 kids, two large districts in two southeastern states. That was done by someone else. And that outcome was measured, and we can show increases in fluency for word fluency, and then for naming fluency. So I can get you all those studies. And then we also have another study for fourth and fifth graders on end of course assessments. I'll give you an example, like the users 33 points more growth on the end of course assessment than in using the program versus those that did not use the program. And then in fifth grade, a 19-point difference. So we have multiple studies that can show that this stuff works and that you will get results if it's implemented properly. And we, obviously, and it's not only us. I mean, many companies. There are a few companies that do what we do. There's all, when you're doing something like this and you're purporting to be able to help students, you have to be able to prove that. And so we have, multiple studies with multiple results, and we even have some from Georgia. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be in 90% of the school districts that we're happy to show. But generally, they're pretty dramatic increases, especially on the reading side. And then training the teachers once it's implemented and being very accessible during that process is something that we're very passionate about as well.
Thank you, Michael. We've got one more brief question from Representative Wade.
Thank you for your information today. This is an especially important issue to me, and not just because I have a child in first and third grade, but this is, research shows the most important learning begins in this age bracket. So thanks for the information. You referenced 90% relationship with schools in Georgia. Is that 90% of the elementary schools in Georgia?
It's all 90% of the school, basically 90% of the school districts. So we could have some elementary products. We have a lot of products K-12. We have we do algebra 2, in 10th grade. So we have a ton of high school products as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that you were talking about all school districts.
all products, all school districts, all product sets. And some people may use us for an AP course where they don't have a teacher, and so it could be one class. But we do very large urban school districts and very small rural school districts, so it doesn't really matter.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'll follow up with you on getting some more information. We appreciate you being here today and presenting this to us. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to hearing from you. And if I can be a resource for you all, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll figure out what our technology is going to be here in a minute. But before we get started, if y'all would, I'm sure you've all seen the news of the passing of our First Lady, former First Lady. And, I find it interesting that we're here talking about literacy and talking about education and all that she did in our state. And it's a sad day for us as a state to lose her. And so I hope you'll join me in a moment of silence in her memory. And then I'm going to turn it over to Representative Wade to open us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us to gather today to be stewards for that most precious gift, which is our children. Guide us and direct us in this effort. Let us have ears to listen and a heart for what's in the best interest of all students, not the adults in the room, but the students in the room, not in the room. Watch over the Deal family. We know another angel's at home, but I'm sure she's a guardian still to this moment over children in this state. And I'm glad to be here doing this work, especially in honor of a wonderful, amazing person like former First Lady Sandra Deal. She was a special person. Thank you for being here, and God just guide us. And thank you for allowing us to serve. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, so I know we've got some supplemental material up here. I know we've got some presentations that you guys provided us. And I think we've got them all lumped into one. So I don't really know how y'all want to handle that from a presentation standpoint and how we're going to do that, but we'll utilize the podium up here. You'll have a laptop there that you can control your PowerPoint. And so then we've all, as you can see, we've all got monitors here and be able to see that presentation. And those of you in the audience will be able to see that over here. So I will ask Courtney to make sure that we've got a computer that has a PowerPoint loaded. And then Wayne, are you going to be our first one up? All right, well, we'll make sure this works, and I'll grab these notebooks and we'll get started.
Back one.
You want to test that microphone and make sure?
Yes, sir. How is that okay? Okay.
If you will, just introduce yourself so everyone on the
Yes, sir.
committee knows you, and then the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good afternoon. I am Wayne Lovell, and I'm the superintendent of Mountain Education Charter High School. Madam Pro Tem, Chairman Dubnik, Vice Chair Irwin, Representative Jaspers, Representative Wade. I just want to begin by thanking each of you for giving us this opportunity and allowing us to be here to tell the stories. I want to begin my portion today by just sharing a little bit about who we are, about our passion, and about the sense of urgency we have and how we feel as we are moving forward. And I would ask that you would just bear with me. I feel a little bit outside of my element. I'm outside my comfort zone here today. But I know that each of you as elected officials, you feel the burden of leadership. And it's not something that you go home at night and you can take off. And I know that over the past year or so, that burden has been a little bit heavier. I do want to express that there's an additional weight that I believe that myself and my colleagues are carrying. And it's the mantle of a ministry. Speaking for myself, I recognize that the work we do, and I really hesitate at that word because it's more than that. It really is a ministry that we're engaged in. And I wanted to share with you this afternoon my life verse, and that's Isaiah 6:8. And it says, then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. And I feel like that's what the organizations that are before you today have answered. I believe the objective, or at least one objective here today, is to be transparent, and I want to be transparent with each of you. That verse I just shared has been a guide throughout my life, and I have spent my adult life in service to our nation, to our state, to the mountain communities, and probably most importantly, to some of the most marginalized students in the state. I am extremely passionate about what I do, about our vision, about our mission, and I think I speak for all of us here today. We all are. And I want to make this just a little bit personal. And I want to say, I mean, no disrespect to my father. I come from a very loving home. And he showed me what hard work was really about. But I'm the son of a high school dropout. And I understand the importance of a high school diploma. And I have lived a life that's been impacted by decisions that sometimes have been outside my control. But I understand that education is a great equalizer. If the events in my life have led me to where I am today, I can confidently say that those times have been redeemed through the service that God has given me an opportunity to engage in. I truly feel I'm in the right place at the right time, and I'm doing the right thing for the right reason, and that my season here is not over. And I say all this to impress upon each of you that I'm extremely passionate. My colleagues are extremely passionate. I think you could probably say that before you today is a zealot, an ideologue for the non-traditional at-risk students. We're committed to working towards a solution that safeguards these students. And I want you to hear it from me that whatever the issues or concerns are, I'm asking to be able to work together to address these. And whether that's a funding issue, a governance issue, or any of the other factors that may come into play, when it comes to our students, the population we're serving, I'm just asking, let's do no harm to the students. Help me to leave here today with a message to all of my stakeholders that we're going to work together. We're going to find a solution. It's all going to be okay. The Mountain Ed is beginning its 30th year. And I think about that as that we've been standing in the gap for many, many years. And if it's not us, if it's not Foothills, it's not Coastal Plains, I don't know who it would be. We began in 1993 as a grassroots initiative in the mountains of North Georgia. And that year we graduated 3 students. We've constantly leaned forward in improving the services we provide. And today we have 18 campuses across North Georgia. And we actually had the best year we've ever had. We graduated 479 students this past year. Now, it's my honor today to introduce my friend and my mentor, Dr. Richard Behrens. I think that he brings a unique perspective to the history component that you asked about. He has been both a collaborative partner as a superintendent of Towns County School District, and he also served as a superintendent of mountain education. And he truly is a subject matter expert when it comes to the history of Mountain Ed. And I would like him to come and share this story with you. Dr. Behrens.
Unfortunately, he only gave me 5 or 10 minutes to cover the subject. And so I wrote it down. I don't normally read, but I'm trying to stay in my time limit. I think they chose me probably more so because I'm probably the oldest guy left that knows some of this stuff and experienced it. But I worked for town with and for mountain education from 1998 through 2015. Started out as a assistant principal with White County High School, and we were partnering with MEC at that time, trying to find out a good way to work with kids and help them. The Mountain Education Charter School opened in 1993. At that time, the average student graduation rate in the state of Georgia was around 73%. The system averages were usually higher, but we questioned that data at the local level. After combing through our local yearbooks and school attendance records, instead of having the 70s plus 80% graduation rate, we were really just above about 50% in White County. And that's pretty much what was going around in those days. They used to have a formula rather than pure data to figure out who was graduating, who wasn't. And there was a lot of transition going that affected that. In those days, there were no organized programs to help the at-risk kids in our mountain counties. There was a push for alternative education, but those programs focused on students with behavioral problems. There were no academic credit recovery or dropout recovery programs available. Many of our rural kids were quitting school to work in farms, chicken industry, and other low-skill manual jobs. These rural dropouts stayed in their communities while their peers, the college graduates and the kids who had graduated from high school for jobs, went to the bigger cities. Basically, we had a rural brain drain going on. In 1993, Union County, Towns County, and Fannin County got together with the leadership of Tommy Stevens, who was the superintendent at Union, and worked together to start the Mountain Education Center. And they called it a center then, not necessarily a high school. The program during the first year at Union was paid with local county funds. And as Dr. Lovell just said, there were 3 graduates. Union County agreed to be the fiscal agent to house MEC with the understanding that the role of fiscal agent would be shared by each county in subsequent years. The superintendents were concerned about the negative effects of the out-of-county students' low achievement scores would have on the serving agents in the county. In other words, if I'm covering 3 counties and the low students and the dropout students or the students that are behind come in, your scores are going to go down. During the second year, MEC and the Georgia Department of Ed officially established a high school. In other words, it was a school within the county of Union, serving those 3 counties. The Mountain Education Center High School received FTE funding and got a categorical grant from Guy Middleton. Worked that through for us. And that was standard FTE funding. There wasn't any weight at that time. The following years when they got the 1.5 weight. In those early days, they learned several key lessons. And these kids needed a second chance with additional support and a flexible attendance schedule. At-risk students needed a teacher facilitator in the classroom. Mastery learning with a computer-generated curriculum was time-saving, but not effective without a teacher being there. And that's something that's very important when you're looking at these virtual curriculums and you're looking at kids that are not successful. You've got to have help. They quickly realized that the students attending were not the stereotypical behavior problems. In most cases, they were students failing and dropping out for reasons unrelated to behavior. Trauma issues like coping skills, family illnesses, pregnancy, poverty, jobs to help their family, sibling daycare, the list goes on and on. These students needed additional social services and counseling that day. Schools didn't have the time or the funding to provide. MEC's high school counselors changed their focus from scheduling and testing to helping students deal with social emotional problems, which were holding them back from success. They were dealing with a high rate of generation poverty. Adult mentors were needed to support students like caring aunts or uncles. To advise and help them, keep tabs on their progress, make sure they were coming to school. Caring was their focus. Dr. Lovell and his staff will share some of those programs with you in a few minutes. In 2004, MEC was a school under Towns County. As a new superintendent, the first day that I was on the job, I got a call from Channel 32 in Toccoa asking why our school system was had the lowest graduation rate in the state of Georgia. And what had happened is by having MEC under my program, the MEC program under me, there were 600 kids in the school at that time, and Towns County only had 300. In actuality, our high school was in the top 10% of the state. But when you average those kids in with that 300, you can imagine. We ended up discussing with the news. We were constantly being bombarded by our community folks. And in spite of all those issues, my school board supported MEC. They didn't care what kind of pressure they were getting. These kids needed help. In 2004-05 school year was closing. It was time to pass the fiscal responsibilities of MEC onto another school. We were ready to switch our roles. I couldn't get any of the other superintendents to take it. They were busy, and to be fair, they had a lot of other problems to deal with. So in 2005, we approached the Department of Ed, and we asked for some way to establish a regional school so one county wouldn't have the responsibility of MEC finances, management, and test scores while helping students from a regional area. This started as a series of meetings with then State Superintendent Kathy Cox and her staff that eventually led to Mrs. Cox's recommendation. She's the one that recommended we become the first state charter school. So in 2007, after 2 years of discussions and negotiations, the Georgia Department of Ed awarded MEC a state charter. This charter established an 11-member board with the superintendents from each of the 7 participating school systems, 3 regional community members, and 1 community and school or family connection member. And this was an interesting conversation because at that time, there was concern from Kathy about having superintendents on the board. because we are a randy lot, I will tell you. But in fair, and all kidding aside, the reason we wanted to have the superintendents on there was because we wanted to be their partners. That was a key part of the equation. At the time, superintendents were asked to serve the MEC board to encourage local support and maintain a positive relationship with in-kind facility services and staff access to MEC employees. For MEC employees, let's establish a collegial atmosphere with everyone working together. That is one of the key reasons why these types of schools are successful, is because both sides are working together, sharing information and sharing personnel, sharing curriculum ideas. This is the key to success. During those same years, Superintendent Mitchell Barrett and his MEC staff worked to build self-sufficient schools that improve the curriculum and the social support structure to better serve the needs of at-risk students while adding 5 sites. Basically, they were starting a school from scratch. And keep in mind, no school or system had been started since the 70s. So we couldn't get a school number. We had to get a system number. And I don't have time to tell you, but it's a wonderful story. And it's funny now, it wasn't then. Following a 2012 approval of the constitutional amendment that established the State Charter School Commission of Georgia, we were contacted by the Georgia Board of Ed and given a choice to remain with them as a special charter school or join the State Charter Commission. We chose the State Charter Commission because they offered a 10-year renewal and a continuation of our alternative 1.5 weight refunding. The Georgia Department, at that time, the Department of Ed was really vague about what we could do and couldn't do if we stayed with them. In fact, they felt like, since the commission was there, that there wouldn't be special charter schools, there wouldn't be a role for them, and especially in a regional format. So it was so nebulous, we just decided to go with the commission. And during the 2012-2014 time period, the MEC staff added 3 sites in Bowman, Raven, and Forsyth County. During 2014, the Charter School Commission, while Bonnie Holliday was the director, asked us to increase our rate of expansion. After a great deal of discussion with MEC staff and the board members, it was decided the expansion process for MEC sites should be slow and steady with an emphasis on quality implementation. The MEC board was adamant about maintaining the quality of the existing program. So in the following 8 years, since that time, Dr. Lovell and his staff have added approximately 1 school per year to where they are right now at about 18, which it was a manageable amount for them. In closing, when I did that for you, because that's what my preacher does, okay? The QBE funding formula was established to offer an equal education opportunity for all students in the state. The MEC Foothills and Coastal State Charter Schools offer the training, support, guidance to their member school systems in a way that enhances the educational experiences of their at-risk kids. In essence, these schools are brought together as partners to offer each of their students an equal education. These programs work. If you're concerned about the cost, MEC can continue operations in the future with a regular funding rate and without the 1.5 weight. The issue is more, can they grow? If you're not concerned about the growth and you're concerned about funds, I would suggest you use that standard rate and let them do what they've got to do.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here.
My name is Joe Cash. I'm Assistant Superintendent at Mountain Education Charter High School, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview of our student profile and also who it is that we are. So I've provided information in the packets that you have there. I want to kind of fly through this because I want to make sure that we get to the full complement of what we have prepared for you today. We are self-paced, student-centered public evening high school. We use a facilitated blending learning model, offering a full range of high school courses. We're staffed with certified in-field teachers supporting our students with a 14-to-1 student-teacher ratio. Every student has a mentor. Every student has comprehensive wraparound and individualized intervention services. I want to be clear that we are not an alternative school. We are not an online school. We are not a GED program. We are a second chance, non-traditional school, an opportunity for whatever the circumstances of life present our students. And our focus is on dropout recovery, on prevention, and on intervention in our communities. Just a little bit about the students that we serve. You have those numbers there for you as well. But of our 2,700 students, almost 16% would be students with disability, 28% remedial, 4% ESOL, and only 1.5% of our students are alternatively placed. We have our own alternative school within our system, just as all other systems in the states are required to have. I do want you to know that upon enrollment at Mountain Ed, over 80% of our students are already behind 1 year in their graduating cohort. And of our 479 graduates last year, those that were identified as seniors in the fall FTE count, we graduated 86% of those students, again, having already been 1 or more years behind their graduating cohort. Wanted to give you an overview of our milestones performance from last year. You have that, of course, in front of you as well. One thing I want to note there for you is you're comparing to the state and also to our RESA, which would be Pioneer RESA. We have exceeded the state in all 4 milestone areas. Not only that, if you look at our U.S. history scores, we're in the top 25 for the state of Georgia. This is consistent with our performance since the origin of Mountain Ed, but I want to direct you what you're looking at there. This would be the Comprehensive Performance Framework, which is an assessment or an accountability assessment or a measure for the State Charter Commission. And you will see our consistent performance in green all the way across. You can even go prior to 2016 to see that our academic performance has been without blemish. And you'll see the same with operations and with financial oversight. We appreciated and valued our time with the commission. We felt that we brought some balance to the commission, in fact. I want to say in regard to dual enrollment, these are students currently enrolled, the 47 students currently enrolled in dual enrollment programs. Over the last 3 years, in spite of COVID, we had students earn over 1,000 dual enrollment credits in these institutions. And then finally, I wanted to provide you with a map so that you can see what our footprint is in North Georgia. Those light green shaded areas would be where we're pulling a significant number of students to these 18 campuses that we serve with or partner with other school systems. We do have our central office in Cleveland, as well as an annex that we provide comprehensive services for the South Dakota Child Advocacy Center. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Lovewood.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. We'll be very quick and talk about our board governance and composition. We do have 11 members. 7 of them are superintendents from our area. We have one that is a Pioneer RESA director, and then we have community members to include Family Connection still. I have a commitment from our board that if this is an issue, then it changes. They are committed to changing whatever we need to be in a line and accountable to whatever is requested of us. Tara Elrod is our finance officer.
Good afternoon. I'm Tara Elrod. I'm the CFO for Mountain Ed. You have the information in front of you, and at the very back, there's also a copy of our budget and the fund balance history. But our state revenues for FY23 budget are $33,555,892, and our total expenses are $34.3 million. And our fund balance history, you can see there, our projected FY22 fund balance is $25 million. And our CARES expenses, we received a total of $5.5 million in CARES funding, and we have spent a total of $3.6 million as of August the 17th. And we have a remaining balance of $1,825,713.
Just wanted to provide this closing information here in regard to those districts that we do partner with. Of the over 50 districts that we are, of our currently enrolled students, their school of origin was in, that represents 129 high schools, not just in the state of Georgia. So a great representation of the state.
Sir, I know that we have exceeded our time. Do you want us to cut it off? And
I think at this point, if we've got some questions from the committee, and we'd certainly entertain those right now. It's okay on the time. Dr. Lovell, if I could, and Ms. Elrod, this may be a better question for you. So if you don't mind joining us back for just a moment. I just have three quick numbers, finance-based questions.
Okay.
In no particular order, I noticed that we talk about over the last 10 years, the fund balance growing from 1.6 to 25 million. If we're trying to compare budget, let's use simple numbers here. If budget was $1 million then and it's $10 million now, I can do the math that it's grown 10x. How has your budget versus your fund balance growth? Are they kind of mirroring one another where your fund balance has grown from 1.6 to, that's 15 or 18 times? Has your budget grown that much as well?
So I'm brand new to this. I just started July 1st. So I am going to answer you and say that I know back in FY12, I guess when you have the history here from the 1.5, I believe we had like 988 students FTE at that time, if my memory serves me correctly. So I'm sure that is definitely has a part in it. But for a more detailed answer, I would love to be able to get back to you just because like I said, I'm brand new. My first day on the job as a CFO was July 1st. So I don't have all that prior.
No worries. And I understand that. And so that was 988 roughly FTE, and we're at 2,700 currently.
Correct.
So,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Second question on the CARES Act, you show about 3.7 million of the 5.5. Two things there. Rough idea on the types of things that have been utilized, those funds have been
Yes, sir.
utilized for?
So we have used that, the CARES money for our learning management system development. We've created our own personal online learning system. We paid for PPE supplies, retention bonuses, emergency paid sick leave, hotspots, nurse services, Chromebooks, those types of things.
Is there any plan for that 1.8 that's left?
Yes, so we're continuing with our online learning management system, and they're still building that. And so that is definitely part. And then the rest of it is learning loss to remediate.
Okay. Other questions at this point from the committee? Representative Wade.
Thank you very much. And I'll say this as a former school board member in Dawson County and now serving in this region, I see many of the benefits that Mountain Ed have provided citizens in my community, former students, and folks I've known and folks that probably would have been a high school dropout. So my question is sincere. I'm not trying to, don't take my questions as judgmental. My questions are try to be focused on the finances. I'm a community banker, and finance and economics is my background. So I want to understand something. Okay. I'm a son of two teachers, so I need you to teach me something. Line item 2,400, the way you calculate school administration, $7.7 million, that's 23% of your revenues. Now, I've been around a long time, not as long as everybody, but can you explain to me how that's more than half of your instruction? As a school board member, when we looked at our school budgets, we always tried to make sure that our instruction number was, somewhere in the 80 to 85% range. And in some cases, during the Great Recession, we focused that number to be closer to 90% so that we kept teachers and, a lot of central office staff. It got really trimmed. So I know it's a different model. I know it's 18 different campuses, and there I'm sure are some administrative challenges there, but can you explain to me why that is?
So again, like I said, I'm brand new, and I did not create the FY23 budget. My predecessor is the one who created the budget. So I can definitely look back and go through that.
Can somebody?
Dr. Glover.
Sure.
I just wanted to go back and say that we went from having 54 full-time employees. We're now down to 38. And so that's been part of our strategic plan. We have over 1,000 employees, but all of those are part-time and they work with us on our campuses. So at the central office right now, we have 38 full-time employees.
And so that 38, that basically is what funds the 38 people that help guide the other roughly 1,000. How many of the 1,000 are part-time and how many are full-time?
So we
know?
have over 1,000 part-time employees, might be teachers, mentors, social workers, registrars, principals at our campuses, but we have 38 full-time employees total.
So the principal expenditure, is that included in instruction or in line item 2,400? Do you know?
That's 2,400.
So that's included. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll reserve this. I don't like how this budget looks just because to me, it doesn't tell the focus of, doesn't tell the picture of how you have structured, but that makes sense that that's where that falls. All right. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Elrod, let
Yes,
me
sir.
ask you a question if I can. I'm looking at your FY '23 budget. You have a local line there of $129,000 donations for scholarships.
Yes.
First of all, you explain that local contribution, how you get it, who gives it.
Okay, so that could be from individuals, businesses, churches. They will donate into our school activity fund, and we give scholarships, book reimbursements to our graduating seniors.
Okay, so that's not coming from the local school systems.
Correct. So-
Okay. How about in-kind donations? Do you list in-kind donations from school systems anywhere when you use a building? Or if they clean the building or maintain the building?
So we actually pay an M&O service fee to our partners, and they get an annual fee to help them offset their custodial and energy cost.
Gotcha. And I believe I got a question for Wayne then too, if I could,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir. Yes, please.
Wayne, looking your students with disabilities numbers of, approximately 15%, that's pretty close to state average for schools. In my recollection, do you provide transportation for those students that need that?
We will provide transportation if there's a circumstance where it is identified in an IEP that is required. But typically, we do not provide any transportation. We will try to offset the transportation cost if there is a need that, is we go through and filling out the free and reduced lunch forms. We have a transportation assistance program where we provide that. But if it's a student that their disability requires it, then we have to do that.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Representative Wade.
Yeah, just a couple follow-up questions, just still thinking over here. As far as the number of the federal budget that you received, so I know that you had a really like the detail on the CARES Act funding and things. Outside of what's happened throughout the last, say, 3 fiscal cycles, what is, do you expect a minimum amount of federal funding going forward? Did you have, what number is that going to look like, say, in 2 years from now? Is it going to still be in $1 million to $2 million a year, or?
So we also receive Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, SPED. So we receive all that, and that, as far as we know, will continue. So of that 3 million, the only part that's left is that 1.8 that's left from CARES. So we'll still be getting it 2 million,
Okay.
in federal funds.
So roughly 2 million.
Yes,
So
sir.
about 7.5% of your budget is federal, right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. And then to the question that Vice Chairman Irwin asked about the maintenance operation and how you spread that out, is that pretty much encapsulated in line 2,600 where that's?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Where that expense is tracked? Okay.
Yes.
And then does Mountain Education own actually any of its locations in that 18 footprint or the central office?
No, not from our local school systems. I mean,
Okay.
we own our building that our central office is in, but we do not own any.
But that,
buildings.
everything else is leased or
Yes, sir.
shared space? Okay, all right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think, okay. Dr. Lovell, is that everything that your school has for?
We actually ran out of time, but I do have Dr. Hightower here from Cherokee, the superintendent of Cherokee County. And I know that if time is available sometime, that he could speak, but
If you will, I think our Madam Pro Tem,
you have some questions. If you'll press the button and I'll.
Can you hear me? I had a question for Dr. Is it Behrens? Yes, sir. I enjoyed listening to your history. I was somewhat familiar with the history, but you filled some things in for me. And I noted that you mentioned in 2004 that, well, I'm sure there are other factors, but the only factor you mentioned that led the school to go to the state and ask for a different model to partner with the DOE was that there was a problem with how the students were counted with their graduation rate. That by taking all these regional students, because they were, I guess, physically located in one school system physically, that it brought down the graduation rate in other scores. That's right. Had the state been able to figure that out in a way that the students were counted back from the school that they came from, would you have approached the DOE to change the model?
We were open to any solution, but that was the only one, that they came up with,
Right.
if that answers your question.
Yes, because it does seem that is an issue with the students in terms of how they're counted. The flip side of that today, and a grave concern of mine, is that I believe incentives matter, and there's an incentive to send a student to this model versus keeping them back home if the system offers an alternative school, because not only do they come off your books budget-wise, they come off your books from an accountability standpoint. Can you respond to that?
Yes, ma'am. That's interesting. We talked about that quite a bit. These students were not successful in their home school. And what was happening in a lot of cases, they were continuing the same type of instruction. By having an incentive to go to another school, in other words, having another school to go to, and being able to partner with those other schools, it gave the homeschool there was less resistance by the homeschool to move them to the MEC. In other words, it was helping. It was a symbiotic relationship there. And that's where, if you start looking at how this partnership works, first of all, systems are not holding kids just for FTE, and they're not pushing them away for FTE. They want the best for them, but you want to have something that will serve them in a better fashion and is successful. And so that's why that works. It's not necessarily what you're alluding to.
Well, and I see what you mean, that it helped grow the partnership because it didn't hold the system back in the sense that, but the flip side of that is that they come off, I mean, it's not just FTE from a QBE standpoint, it's also the local funding. No longer do you have to fund them locally. You don't have, you lose the QBE, but
that wasn't necessarily what systems were looking at. What they were looking at in most cases was, we haven't been successful. These kids were walking out, so they wouldn't have been anywhere. It's not like, okay, we're going to hold you here, and they just left. And so if they're leaving, why not have a place for them to go that the systems are comfortable with, and they know that they have a different way of trying to successfully help them.
Well, and my recollection in the history was that for many years they were operated as a locally sort of consortium regional school, where you got QBE and then whatever everyone kicked in from a local funding. Initially, when they went to the DOE, they did not receive a local supplement. They just received QBE.
It was a QBE, yeah.
And it was frankly sort of a beautiful accident in that the original charter school bill state authorization was struck down. You were the only state charter school like this The others that had been approved at the state level had to come out of the commission, come over the state special school designation. And then when we passed the constitutional amendment, you got swept in and all of a sudden you got extra funding. But I guess back.
Actually, our funding was the same. When
Excuse me?
Our funding was basically the same when we moved over. That's what.
Originally. And then
Yeah, when
you
we
moved
moved over to the commission.
That's right.
Okay.
But if, it sounds like then if where the graduation rate, where that counts and other performance measures, if that were solved, then given the nature of how you're organized, and if, as was suggested, you could do away with the local supplement, why wouldn't the board want it to be a regionally, locally approved charter school? Why wouldn't the superintendents and the school board support
If I
that?
understand your question.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that the schools would remain, the schools would stay separate from everyone else and serve their own children.
No, you kept this model precisely as you have it now.
Okay.
You have the same board. The state just doesn't approve your charter. Your local school districts approve your charter. That's the legislation that we passed last year. What's the downside of that? If the superintendents and the school boards value this model, why wouldn't they choose to keep it going forward?
Well, if you can establish that so that they can maintain their current structure and just get approval from them, I don't see an issue with that.
And then they could, because every school system is either a charter system or a strategic contract system, they could choose to locally fund as much or as little as the model demands.
Well,
or
that's
as they
different now.
choose.
You're saying locally fund,
Well, the state would continue as we do with other students.
Well, if the FTE follows the student,
Right.
I'm not, I've been away from, your funding and such for about 10 years. So I couldn't answer that question.
The QBE would follow the student. And
yeah.
then the local school systems, just as they did as they were originated, born, and sustained for many years, could choose how to fund the balance.
So they could
locally.
combine together all the local systems. If you have 18 systems at MEC, they can combine together and still, and they would get the additional funding that MEC is now getting.
They would get the what?
They would get the funding that MEC is now getting for the students, right?
They would get the state funding, the QBE funding that every student in Georgia earns, depending on their characteristics. The state would not continue to fund a local supplement because this would be a locally run consortium, just as they originally were.
I haven't been around their book, so I can't tell you. I can't answer that for you. That would have to be a question for Dr. Lovell as far as that funding. But if you could get everybody together so that they could get the funding, I don't think they really would care.
Thank you.
Dr. Lovell.
Madam Pro Tem, I think that I see a lot of issues operationally
Okay.
by doing that. And, for Coastal and I, we're 10 months out. And for us to basically recreate the wheel, what we have is working. And I know if we can take the little chop here, chop there, whatever, fine tune the program. But I think it's a steep hill for an organization over the next 10 months to have these local superintendents go to their boards and try to work with a board to get approval, come back. And as of right now, I don't have anyone that's willing to even entertain the idea of being locally authorized. And so I don't know, and I would probably have to have some of them speak to that, from the reasons that they feel like that would not be something that they're willing to do. But I think it's a very steep hill to do something. And I heard something at the DOE when we went over, and they said, if we were starting a school, this might be a great way to do it. But from where we are now, it would be like taking a mattress that you purchased online and shipped to your house and unpacking it from the package it came in and letting it inflate and now then trying to stuff it back into that package. It is going to be difficult for us to do, I feel like, what you're asking on that part.
Well, I mean, it was the legislation that passed last
ma'am.
year. And I'm assuming since 7 of the 11 superintendents serve on your board, that I would assume y'all have had those conversations.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
message, I think, to the legislature is if you're not willing to run it and fund it yourselves, at least in some fashion, then beautiful slides don't make it valuable to them.
Yes, ma'am.
The message to us is that your school board doesn't value the school and the performance enough to actually, I mean, you're running it now.
We are.
7 superintendents are on the board. How is it completely reinventing it when your locations could remain the same? I mean, much could remain the same. You would just have to,
So where does CPI go?
Excuse me?
And where does the CPI and all those accountability factors, is that still Mountain Ed? Are we still LEA, or are we now broken into 18?
you would be a locally approved charter school as you were originally and served for many years. And then you could choose, your contracts with the state allow you to determine how much to fund each student. It appears from your fund balances that you're way overfunded at $7,000 per student and taxpayer dollar for a local supplement. So it sounds like there's a lot of room to cut back.
And I
Your
would
fund
agree.
balance per student is much higher than it is per student for the home school systems.
Right.
So I'm
And-
just
And I
asking,
agree that obviously we could do this cheaper. And I think that's what you will
Right.
hear from my colleagues.
Yeah.
I just don't understand, and I appreciate you making the point, but it seems like we're turning this thing upside down. And we have a program that is working, it is successful. And we have, I know you talked about the slides, it demonstrates the success of the program. Can we do it cheaper? To me, it seems like that there is an easier path forward than what is being requested of us. And if that path was just to stay as a state special charter. So am I correct that if we do not convert in the next 10 months to this local authorized alternative, we are dissolved?
that was what the legislation did and y'all agreed to, and that was what, I think it was signed in May, and we had our conversations in March. That would be accurate. And
I guess what
And I
my
would suggest the model
confusion.
wouldn't have to change that much. You have a pretty good model in place.
Yes, ma'am.
You just wouldn't need the state to authorize it beyond, you would need another step where y'all would authorize it.
You know, when we left here that day, I was assured that we would find a path forward, that we were going to work this out. And I trusted in that. Today, I really don't know how to answer or respond to some of this because it's more than just me as a superintendent on how to operationalize this as becoming a local authorized alternative charter. Again, it's a steep hill. I believe in the vision and mission of the organization, and I will do everything I can to ensure its sustainability. And I just really don't know how to do that this moment. And I will have to lean in on some other folks for that.
Can I ask one final question? I'll leave it to others. Do the school boards representing those 11 systems, do they value what you do?
I believe we're highly valued for the work we do. I think that that's a very complicated and not an easy question to answer. You know, we have been in existence now for going on 30 years. My relationship with Dr. Hightower is totally different from some place that I've been for years and years, and it's been generational. You know, I'm working for a superintendent in a community that they may not see the value because they were not the superintendent that initiated that initial campus site. And they may be questioning, well, why do we have them here? And maybe they don't see the value. And I would think that probably with Foothills and Coastal Plains, those individuals, they're newer. We're generationally into this. I feel like we are, I had someone at one of our meetings the other day talked about how things would go from anticipating to expectations. And sometimes maybe the work we actually do is overlooked. And, you know, you can see folks that we partner with, they may not give us credit for the work that we've done that has sustained their graduation rate as it is currently, because they don't recognize the work that's going on behind the scenes as we go in and pull up kids that have fallen off the roll or for whatever reason are no longer engaged in a local traditional program. And so I think it's a very complicated, do I think they value? I think the communities at large do. I don't know how much a local board of education is aware of the work that we do in some areas. I don't know how much a local superintendent really would want to engage in a political hot potato such as this. So it's very complicated.
I appreciate the work you do, and I just have to conclude by saying they serve on the board, the superintendents. I mean, 7 of the 11 do. And you have a model in place that looks very similar to a locally approved charter school, regional charter school, with who runs it. We have nothing like that at any other, I mean, nothing looks like that at the state level. It appears that you have a model that in some fashion you could sustain with the support of your local school boards and the superintendents who actually serve on the boards and should be informing their school boards of the work that you're doing. Anyway, thank you for your responses.
Thank you.
Representative Wade. Yeah, this is kind of a follow-up for the conversation. So here's, I heard some conversation about the history, and as a person who remembers my brother's class, who some of his friends ended up transferring to Mountain Ed. And I know people in my community that are now customers of mine in my banking world that went to Mountain Ed. As a former school board member for Dawson County for almost 15 years, there's not one board member that served in that community that did not have a extreme belief that this was a benefit to the students, whether that was 25 students to 50 to 100 to 150 students that we, saw those students have the opportunity. So I would challenge you this. In my prayer, I opened with, let's keep the kids at the center of this. And frankly, I think adults need to roll up their sleeves and figure it out. And, we've set in statute a timeline so that a resolution can be made. I work with a lot of closing attorneys, and there's nothing like the last minute to get things done to close a deal. And that sets up the stage for necessity as the mother of invention. You guys can figure it out. You've got 23% of your budget allocated to some great sharp minds that can figure out a way to come up with working with what I heard was a symbiotic partnership with 7 of your 11 board members being superintendents in the schools to which these students come from. They care about those kids. I, as a school board member, never would have voted to say, hey, our alternative school that we already have isn't meeting the needs of these students. We have an avenue. It's already existing, as you said. All we're talking about is changing the governance structure. And in my opinion, as a school board member, I can look at my constituents and say, you know what, right now, the state is funding 93% of this program. I think if we have 100 students in there, we need to come up with a dollar amount as to how much we're going to contribute to this program, and then allow it to be home rule and locally controlled. And I really think you're not allowing for a good concerted effort conversation with your superintendents to come up with a solution. And that's all of this is my opinion derived from this meeting today. I know superintendents. I know school board members in every single one of the schools that you serve on. I've never heard those schools say that Mountain Ed is not meeting the needs of those specific students because of the issues that your presentation laid out. It's an adult problem. I suggest you figure it out. And the state's not saying we're walking away. We're going to fund FTE. That's a big number. It's the highest number it's ever been in this state's history.
Yes, sir.
And if I'm wrong, somebody tell me I'm wrong, because I had a dad that, he was a teacher. He let me know when I was wrong. I'm happy to take it right between the eyes, face to face. I'll come and meet with every superintendent and advocate for this with you. There's a way to get this done, and I think it's scary because it's different. But the amount of difference that you're talking about, the board's not going to change. Your locations aren't going to change. Those 1,000 employees aren't going to change. The kids you got in your room aren't going to change. What's changing? A little bit
And I
more of
guess,
a
sir,
documented dollar amount of symbiotic partnership.
that was my question. If nothing changes, why change it? I mean.
Well, there is a change. That is
Well-
that local communities need to fund a little bit into the program.
Right.
We're not talking about tons. I mean, my school board members have texted me during this meeting that their administrative cost is 6.5% of the budget. They're currently sitting on an average of about $1,500 per student in their ending fund balance. You're sitting on somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 per. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's all relative to what you're trying to do, but it's the same people in the same communities serving the same kids. There's a solution, and I think your team can figure it out. And I think you've got a committee that wants to help you find that solution. That's my comments, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Well, sir, can I say one thing? We're not the bad guys here. And we're trying, and we are committed to working towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next presentation. Do we have supplemental materials as well?
Good. If you will introduce yourself, and then the microphone will be yours.
Okay. All right. Thank you, first of all, for having us today. We've been waiting for this for 2 years. Once that legislation was passed, we've been very aggressive about trying to meet and get working on this. And we're glad to be working on this, and we will find a solution because there is an answer. But I have with me today, and if you will time me and make sure I'm done in 20 minutes with our session. Thank you, Paul. That's your put the timer on. I want to hear it go off. And in 20 minutes, I have Bonnie Knight, who is our CFO, and she can answer any kind of budgeting question. However, she won't be part of our speaking, but she is here if that comes up. I am fortunate to have Dr. Norris Price, and she serves on our board, and she's going to introduce herself and talk to some of the points that were just mentioned about working with boards, et cetera. And then I'll come back around and answer the questions you sent us that you wanted answers for this meeting. And, but thank you for letting us be here. Norris, if you'll start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Education Committee. I'm grateful that the committee is taking time to look closely at students who are disengaged, dropping out, or not doing well in our traditional high schools. In Baldwin County, a partnership with Foothills Education Charter High School is extremely important. In Baldwin County, we strive to keep students engaged and learning at every step of their academic journey. We have multiple strategies in place to connect students who are struggling and keep them on track. For example, we have implemented a number of dropout prevention strategies, such as a 9th grade academy, to ensure students get a solid start to their high school journey. We have a graduation committee who works with the counselors to ensure that every student has a graduation plan and is on track to graduate. We also have a credit recovery program during 0 and 5th block and a graduation coach in partnership with communities and schools. And for our students who demonstrate discipline issues, we have an alternative education program. These students are not served through Foothills. While we are able to meet the needs of most of our students, some require solutions we do not have the capacity and the resources to provide. And this is true for many of the districts in rural Georgia. None of my recent districts have an evening school options for students. This is why our partnership with Foothills is so valuable. Since the inception in 2015, the Baldwin Foothills site has served 840 students, including 692 fully enrolled students, 20 Foothills Plus students. These are students that are over 21 and were short anywhere from 1 to 5 credits. And they were allowed to complete those credits and earn their high school diploma. And we had 128 transfer credit students. Transfer credit students graduate graduate from Baldwin High School, but Foothills helps them to get the credits that they're missing at night to graduate with us on time and with their peers. And Foothills doesn't only serve as a resource for my school district, it's also a regional school. 25% of the students that are served at Foothills come from outside of Baldwin County. The Foothill models with evening classes, students progressing at their own pace and not on a mandated schedule is in a curriculum designed by Georgia educators, provides incredible support for our students. Not only do they have mentors and graduation coaches and wraparound services, they also provide career training like welding and dual enrollment, and they are responsive to the needs of our students who are not fitting in a traditional high school. It would be very difficult for Baldwin County to replicate these services. For example, the self-paced approach to learning is so critical to the success of students at Foothills. And it works not only during the 180 days of school, but also all year round. As someone who grew up in poverty and the first person in my family to earn a high school diploma, I know the importance of having options for students to graduate from high school. I too believe that education is a great equalizer and a game changer. In my community, we have a great deal of generational poverty. We are doing everything we can to address this issue. Not only do our students need a non-traditional evening program, but so do their parents and guardians. Many adults in our community are provided a second chance when they are awarded a high school diploma. A traditional high school would not be able to provide those services. So Foothill is critical to the overall support of our students. The issues that these students face, and you heard our colleagues talk about, it could be anywhere from having to help their families pay their bills and they have to go to work, or a student that is pregnant and therefore cannot work within a traditional setting, or they have childcare issues that they cannot work out. And I call it the invisible backpack. That's the backpack that has lots of challenges that we do not know about. And fortunately for us, Foothills is there to support these students. The challenges for communities in rural areas, the lack of resources is real. I had the opportunity to work in two large urban districts, Fairfax County, Virginia, and Fulton County, Georgia. These large urban districts are able to provide an evening option for their students, and they do not face the challenges that we have with lack of resources in rural Georgia. What we can do is partner with you in the state to make sure we break the generational poverty that exists in our community. I would hope that you would look at all the values that are brought forth through the model that Foothills has implemented. The Baldwin County welcomes the opportunity to open our doors in providing a state charter special school like Foothills. We provide them with access to our building, to our technology, and other in-kind resources. We can and are providing an excellent choice for students. This model not only serves Baldwin County, but students from all over our region. Serving these students well it's not just a Baldwin challenge, it is a Georgia challenge. Foothills, along with Mountain Education and Coastal Plains, are an essential part of a statewide Georgia solution to our high school dropouts. I know that I speak for all the superintendents and boards of education who are working with Foothills. We want to be the state's partner and find a solution to this critically important issue. At the conclusion of our presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to turn it over back to Dr. Gibney Sherman, and I thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Thank you. And Norisa is Georgia's Superintendent of the Year, by the way, and one of the 4 finalists for our nation. And I'm just so proud to have her serve on our board and give us guidance. And it's not just lip service. She's probably the hardest work person out there. And she's given us guidance since we formed Foothills, and I appreciate it. This made us a stronger place. Okay, now I can't go through all this because I am being held to my time, but this is our timeline, and I would love to have questions about all of these things. But we started in 2014 to write a petition to the commission to form Foothills, modeled after Mountain Ed, and we opened in 2015, and we were responding to the needs of our communities that we serve. We were asked to open up. And then we were asked by the commission to actually serve the students in the Youth Challenge program. And we did, and we do, and it's going great. And the generals would be very happy to come and talk to you about that. And then we were asked by the Department of Corrections to form a high school in our 3 corrections facilities. So we worked with Mountain Ed in January of 2015 before we opened to pilot. And now we continue to serve students in 3 state prisons. And then we continue to work in responding to the needs of our community. It's just not creating something. People are asking and wanting. And Noree said that her site has 25% of the kids are outside of Baldwin County. That's low. Most of our other sites have like 50% of their kids come from outside of the district proper. And so we can come back and talk about that because that was one of the questions that came up. The other thing that we were being asked to help with was this transfer credit. You might notice credit recovery, kids who need one course to graduate on time with their peers. And so we created those programs, and that's very active. We also, during the pandemic, as you know, virtual education became real important. But truthfully, across the state, the offerings were slim and not very good. But we were able to develop a quality virtual program, and we have it open today, and we're limited at 350 by our design. And it's working. It's probably one of the finest places you could ever, it's not just sit and get, it's teachers interacting and working with families and students to make sure these students are moving along. You ask about who do we serve, where they are. And right now we have a little over 3,000 students, and I have it broken down. And you heard Dr. Price mention Foothills Plus. Those are students who have aged out and they're not eligible for the QBE funding. So they pay a small tuition in order, because we have to charge them since we can't use state dollars. And that's been very popular. But we didn't want to move from our mission. So they had to be within 5 credit hours of being able to participate in Foothills Plus. But for communities, that has been well. But everything's based on needs. We do partner with our sites, and it's an honest partnership. And I know the logistics, the adult things, that's a piece of it, but we are past that. We are after what can we do for these kids that they're not getting right now. We want to work with you to come up with a solution that is reasonable and sustainable, not something that's just patched together and get it done. And we've been meeting every single week internally, and we've had many legislators come to us. We've met with the budget people from the House, from the Senate, and from OPB. We have talked and talked and talked about different solutions that we think can work. So we haven't just been sitting there. We've been working very hard, and we are really hoping that we can share those ideas with you. And I know time is an issue, so we won't be able to. But we do have some links that will show you the trends and how students are growing. And I have to tell you, the partnerships are not casual. It usually takes a courting time of 2 to 3 years with the school district before they come in, because we have to make sure they have the same vision we do about serving these students. And it's not what you suggested, that it might be a dumping. We're not about that. We are not that kind of facility. Now, these are our kids, and you'd ask about who they are as far as the different areas. I want to bring your attention to economically disadvantaged. We compared it to the state and Foothills, and the state is at 45%, and our students is 74%. So these kids have some challenges when they come in. And the other piece of note is that the state average is 12.6, Chris, for the students with disability, and we have 17.3. We're very serious and very focused in making sure we're compliant and delivering special ed services. And there's more to say, but we will move on. we do have, and you heard again, Dr. Price refer to this, we are student driven. Our students are our customers. That's what we're focused on. Who are they and what do they need and what barriers do we need to break down? It's not a tidy solution because each student comes in with their own story, and whatever their story is, we'll address that. Okay. And the curriculum is not casual. There's not a product out there that is aligned to the state standards. And anyone who tells you it is, they're wrong. They don't line up. And we got in trouble the first 2 years and did not meet our standards with achievement, but we're meeting it and exceeding it now because we have a product that the students are actually learning and it's aligned. The small teacher ratio, self-paced. As a matter of fact, when you interview the kids when they leave, they say the number one thing they like about Foothills is that they can move at their own rate. If they have life interrupting, they can step back, or if they have more time, they can go faster and having a meaningful adult in their life. There's, again, I'm a little frustrated because I have more to say and share. The next side, looking at our business model, because that was a question, is looking at student success supports. We have a lot of wraparound services that we offer to our students, and ones that I want to point out here is that the alumni transition team. Kids are terrified to graduate. They don't know what to do when they finish. And so we realized that's something that we needed to address. And now we have alumni transition coordinators that help escort them out the door and get them in jobs. And that is the next piece I really want to talk about. Not only are these kids getting a quality education and a high school diploma, but they're getting jobs. We have surveyed and found out where are the gaps in our great state, where do we need and people working, where do we need the credentials? And we've gone out there and we have trained. As a matter of fact, we are now on our 8th cohort of welders. We've had 74 kids get credentials. And let me tell you something, Mr. Banker, those kids are getting job offers before they graduate at $40,000 to $60,000 a year. And these are kids who are dropped out of school. They didn't have a prayer of getting a job like that, and they're getting them now. But our biggest challenge is stopping employers from hiring them until they finish high school. Stay with us until they finish. We've done a lot in a lot of different areas, and we are just so proud of that part because it's equally as important that they're ready for the next step. Now, but there's a little bit more information about the Weld Ready. That's the program that we talk about in our dual enrollment. And I'm proud to say last year we had 99 kids who participated in dual enrollment. Our kids are smart. They just had life interrupt their way of working and getting through. Then our next slide is showing you the growth. When we were under the State Charter School Commission, they established, working with Georgia State, a way to measure academic success through growth. And it's actually a reasonable way of looking at things. And our kids are growing at a much better rate than the state of Georgia. They are making progress. They come in with gaps, and that's our duty. That's part of the barriers. What do we need to do to address those gaps? And we fill it in with tutoring and making sure the kids have mastery. And then you look at the milestones, and as Mountain Ed, we're making it. Last year we were in the top 10, we are the 10th highest scoring school district in the state of Georgia in American Lit. And our scores have continued to do well. And then the next one, you're looking at your graduates, and that's our end in mind. And we had 1,844 graduates since we opened in 2015. And of those, 412 are from corrections. Now that's a whole 2 days I could talk to you about corrections. But of those kids who graduate from corrections with a high school diploma and are released, only 1% come back. The state average in corrections when they're released is 40%. So it is making a difference. Youth Challenge is a fabulous partner that we work through, and we have a quality program for those kids. And they're only there for 22 weeks, but we've extended it. And we now work with those kids after the 22-week period so they can finish up their high school diploma, and we could not be prouder. And then looking at the next page is, and Mountain Ed showed this is from the commission and how we've met and been compliant with all the things we had to do with operations and finances and academics. And the next page, the piece that, the reason this model works, most of our people are part-time. We have very few full-time employees, and that's a big part of our solution. As a matter of fact, year one, I had to work for free because we didn't have any money. And so I just volunteered for a year, but that was the right thing to do to get us going. And because of that, we do have resources that we can be nimble. And that would be the scary part of being into a school district. And we can make changes and make innovations based on the kids who are sitting right in front of us. We're not having to wait for everyone else to come along. We are making the decisions and changing now. Statewide enrollment helps to break a barrier down. If a kid has to go live with grandma or go live with auntie or wherever, they can move wherever and we can still pull them in and serve them. And that makes a big difference. A lot of our systems that we work with are lower wealth systems, and they don't have access to something like this. And Maurice mentioned that. If you go down, and particularly when you hear from coastal plains, there's nothing around for these kids to go to for other options in order to get a high school diploma. Our partners are really important, not only to help us with program changes and ideas and innovations, but they provide facilities which are wonderful, they're beautiful, and we're able to use their internet, their utilities, their custodians. All of that helps to make it work. The next picture, now this I really wish I had time to do. And if you hover over each one of those dots, you'll see where the kids are. And you can see where we're spread around and where we're not. Those kids don't have access to this type of programming. There's a yellow map that's up there. Okay, go back and if you would. Okay.
Sorry.
Right there. That shows you where we are. And you see those two in red, butts and bib. That's when we started the replication process for expanding, because we think we're big enough at Foothills. You ask about how big. We don't think we need to be any bigger. We think it needs to be more community driven and let the community operate and own regionally these schools. But we're happy to help other school systems like Coastal Plains to form their own entity and have their own control. Some of what you were saying, to keep it local. We don't feel the need to have to control that, but we're small enough. We can share resources. We share teachers. We share curriculum. We share students. Everything happens around in that region and it's working. And that is where we had started. Now, and then we were told we couldn't go any further. And so we just kept on butts and bib as a part of Foothills temporarily, we thought, until they could be their own entity. And that's a long way down there, to go to bib and butts, but we're committed. So we have leadership down there that sees about them and makes sure they have what they need. The next page talks about our board. At the request of the commission, they wanted us to reduce our board. We had each one of our superintendents represented, and then we had the Department of Corrections and RESA, and then we broke it down and reduced it to 5 members, and RESA's one. And what we did is we have a representative superintendent for our large systems, our medium size, and our small, and it's a set of 5. That's my board, and they are demanding, and they want a lot of information, and they understand this information, and they know how to ask it, and I treasure that professional relationship. But then all that changed in 2020 when we were asked to reduce the size of our board. But we're functioning fine. We're good. We're happy. Whatever the rules are, is that my time? Okay. Let me just show you what's clipped. This is our revenues that you ask about. This is our overall budget. It's in there. And if you go to the next one, this is our fund balance, is a history. And I urge you to ask Bonnie about that. And she can explain it better than I can about the history and where that came from. And then the last page, you ask about the CARES Act funding, and we've got all the detail for you. And again, I'd urge you to ask Bonnie that. But let me just end with saying thank you for letting us be here. And we do want to be part of the solution because we think we have an answer here. And if there's some changes and tweaks that we need to make, let's make it and move it on. We've got too many kids that need us, thousands of kids.
Thank you. Quick question.
Yes, sir.
What was your rough FTE count when you first opened?
625. And let me tell you why, because when we did the contract, they wanted to put in, we had to get at least 500 kids, and I was terrified. So I said, can we change it to 300? Because I'm afraid, well, that didn't happen. We were at 325 year one.
Okay. Dr. Price, would you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Let me start by congratulating you on your recognition and wishing you well in that Final Four, if
Thank
you
you.
will. So I hear your conversation here, and I feel the value I believe that you and your school system place in Foothills and the service they offer. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
I've heard that other superintendents value this as long as the state is funding the supplemental piece of that. I'd love just to hear your take on that statement, that this is good as long as someone else is paying for it.
Well, I can tell you that in talking to my RESA districts, they do not have the funding. Therefore, they're not offering this option to their kids. I just happened to be in Clark County when we were talking about starting Foothills. And when I moved to Baldwin County was not part of the original area. I asked for Baldwin to be part of it because we didn't have an evening program either. And we had over 300 dropouts when I arrived with a graduation rate of 66%. So I knew we needed to do something. And our board supported, our board had to vote on us becoming part of Foothills. So they saw the value. My other colleagues joined in because we had it in Baldwin and we opened it up to them. But if we didn't have it, my RESA districts would not have any option for our students. And I can give you an example of what I'm concerned about. So we had an issue with GNETs. You may be aware of that. We were one of the sites that was asked to shut down, and those students were supposed to return back to their home schools. And that's what we've done. Our kids are not being served well because we are dividing the resources and they're limited. So in order for us to open a center, which I'm committed to that, Baldwin County is the one that has to come up with the facilities and pay for it. And then we also have to come up with a way that we're going to staff it. Although my sister districts are willing to contribute, it's limited as to how much they contribute. So I'm concerned that if this option's eliminated, and let's say that Baldwin County says, we'll be that district, that we will not have the resources contributed. The FTE is not enough to provide all the resources that are needed for students that are dropping out of high school. Just like for our GNET students, the resources that we get are not sufficient to meet the needs.
And I think the question too, that the pro tem brought up earlier and that I'm referencing here is, if it's valued, and as Representative Wade pointed out, if the buildings are there, the faculty, the staff, the facilities, the maintenance, if they're there, and either it's your job as a local school system to provide this service or to partner with the Foothills, would there be a continued partnership between your school system and Foothills if you could provide some financial resources to continue supporting Foothills through that locally approved model that the legislation
Right.
requires?
It all depends on all the resources that they have and the cost of those resources. And I'm thinking right now with the FTE that I get for my students, we don't get enough funding through FTE to provide all the resources that my students need in order to be successful. We're fortunate to be able to have a healthy fund balance and to be able to add that. So, and provide them with the support they need. But I'm not sure if I'm able to take that and now extend it to an evening school, because I already have an alternative school during the school day. I don't know if I can provide support to our kids that are incarcerated. How are we going to fund those kids? I'm not sure the kids from my district that go to Youth Challenge, how do we support them? How does that formula going to work? And the other piece of that is those 21-year-olds that have aged out. We're not going to support that anymore because we can't. So I'm just concerned that the model that is working, if we decide to then bring it back to local control, that we're going to lose out on just some incredible services that are being provided, and we may not be as successful as we are today with our students.
Madam Pro Tem?
Yes, and I did also want to congratulate you. That's really quite a huge recognition to be Superintendent of the Year in a state that's as large as Georgia.
Thank you.
You do a good job. How many students that are Baldwin County students attend Foothills? I have an
Currently-
old number that was 120.
Right, since the start of it, we have over 628. I don't know, I didn't get the enrollment for.
I have an old
this year.
number that's 120 students. I don't know if that's still accurate. Mine's a couple years old.
That's about how
Probably
many is in the
120.
site today.
And then I,
Those kids, oh, excuse me.
and so I would envision if it were a local charter school consortium that you would receive state funding, QBE for the 120, let's call it 120 students. And then whatever the school decided how y'all were going to fund any balance. I mean, your facilities you're already offering, right? I mean, you already have the facilities there.
Right,
So
right.
it's, I'm assuming you would fund them in whatever would be the appropriate way that you do all the other students that are from Baldwin County.
Right. Those are,
that's-
yes, those 120 students are not all Baldwin students.
Right.
They are served at the Baldwin site.
Okay, this was what I was told were Baldwin County students,
Okay.
not at the Baldwin. Mine was broken out by county
Okay,
as to where the students came from. So let's assume that they are actually Baldwin County
Okay.
students, not from other areas, that you would only provide whatever local supplement the school decided, the board members, of which you're a board member now, would decide would be the balance. It's a night school. If it's zero, then y'all have that right because you have a contract with the state in which you can decide how much to fund each student. If it's more than that, it would be more than that. As everyone here knows, we have a shared funding structure in Georgia for public school students, right? The state in
absolutely.
general does not fund 100%. We do for a few students, but it was never envisioned that we would, for example, 100% fund, local and state dollars that make up that sum for students with special needs or students that are alternative students or any other category, kindergarten. Now, you have an alternative program.
We do.
And how many students are in that?
And that are 50 students.
50 students. And you pay whatever is the balance that it takes to fund those students, those 50.
Right.
And I noticed this is a pattern among the schools that participate in these consortium schools, is that many more of the students are free than are a shared cost model. In your case, 50, perhaps 120. I looked at Clark County. Clark County essentially uses Foothills as its alternative school. I think they have about 250 students. They have at least my records from DOE show they have a very small program for 30 students.
They do, but that's not us.
Right, that's not you. I realize that. They don't, according to DOE, they don't have an alternative school program.
They don't have a program.
They use you.
No, they do not.
So they have a school of their own
Yes, they do.
that,
Well,
actually they do. I see that. You're right. They have 30 students in it according to DOE. So they have a school with 30 and they have 250 at Foothills. I mean, that's
Those aren't Clark. There's a lot of our programs.
so some of those are not Clark.
A lot of. probably
That's the
half.
Clark location.
Correct.
The Clark location.
Correct.
But I mean, when you say you don't have the money, I mean, if the school shut down and a number of the Baldwin County kids came back to your schools, I guess you would fund them, right?
They're not coming back.
Then these are kids that have dropped out and said, this is not an environment for me to learn.
But-
They have dropped out.
I mean, it sounds like you're committed to serving them And that I would hope that your school board would be committed to funding some share.
We are committed to doing that, but it is the model and the resources that Foothills provides that I don't believe we would be able to provide it at that level.
Right.
So we may end up
It might
having.
not be at that level. I mean, it's a
Right.
higher level than most students in Georgia receive. Frankly, it's a higher level than your average kindergartner receives in Georgia. So it probably wouldn't be the same level, but it might be an adequate level. It certainly would be the full FTE, not FTE, QBE funding, right? I mean, it would be the full QBE. Every student that attended would earn QBE. And then do you think your school board values it enough to participate in a regional charter school in which you only funded some share of the students that were actually from Baldwin County?
And I believe the answer is yes for my school board. I cannot speak for the other school boards. And that's my concern.
That is a concern. Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem.
thank you.
Seeing nothing else from the committee, thank you all very much for that.
You're missing some money talking.
I think we're good. Thank you. As always, if you will, introduce yourself and we will pass out our materials and you're up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Ricky Behrens. I'm the superintendent for Coastal Plains Education Charter High School. And I know you have sat through a lot, so I'm going to be very brief. And the first thing that we have on our presentation, I have two board members here and also a superintendent. Dr. Bubba Longrear is our board chair. He is the superintendent in Candler County Schools, and he is our board chair. Also have Dr. Adam Hathaway, who is superintendent in Tift County, and he's going to come and speak. And also here we have our board member, Richard Smith, and he is the executive director of First District RESA. So I will go ahead and allow them to come forward.
Good afternoon. Thank y'all for allowing us to be here. I had a little speech spelled out, and it was all about communicating to you how effective and valuable this program is, but I think we all agree on that. So I'm going to spare us that. You know, I guess as I sit here and listen and, you know, we're talking about solutions, as a problem solver by nature. And I'll give a little history real quick. I first became familiar with this type of program from hearing of Mountain Ed Charter. I'd gone up to Northeast Georgia and I just studied some of the things they were doing, and I wanted that for our communities in Southeast Georgia. So we began the quest to try to create that in Southeast Georgia, and we connected with Sherry Gibney Sherman, and the state was more agreeable to allow Foothills to kind of bring in an expansion in Glenn County and Candler County. And Candler County was the fiscal agent for a while. Our Board of Education really valued what it brought to our community as an economic impact potential, and getting some of those students who had dropped out of high school to go back and earn a diploma. Our graduation rate in our county is really good, and really most of the kids at our Candler site, which is a relatively small site, most come from other counties, much more than Candler County. But as I sit here and listen, you know, I'm thinking, all right, what are some solutions? And it seems to me the options are, you know, one, the legislation was passed last year to kind of say this is the way we're moving forward. So option one, obviously, would be, you know, is there anyone that would be willing to pursue legislation to undo that? Option two, what does a locally approved charter entail? And some questions that I'm formulating is, all right, so if our 10 or 12 districts in Coastal Plains want to together request to be a locally approved charter and go that route, what changes for our districts? Does one district have to be that now the one that houses all that, even though it's spread around and so forth? And then obviously the third option would be kind of throw our hands up and just say the obstacles are too big let's just do away with it or let it die. I don't believe that option would be allowed to happen because each individual in this room puts so much effort into trying to create these opportunities for students. So one thing that I'm really interested in is, moving forward and finding what does that locally approved charter exactly mean for Coastal Plains, individually for Foothills and individually for Mountain Ed. But, I had some individual stories of students that have had success. I don't think I need to go into those. Each of you obviously have acknowledged, you realize the power of it. So I just appreciate the opportunity to share and just look forward to continuing to serve students that are most at risk and serve them in the most meaningful manner. So thank y'all for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a little bit unique to this group because I'm the superintendent in Tift County. I'm Adam Hathaway, and we don't currently have a program in Tift County. My board, the day before the pandemic hit, voted to approve our partnership with Coastal Plains, and we've been in a holding pattern since then. But I did a administrative tour around North Georgia. I was in White County. I was in Gilmer County as a principal as well. And I saw the direct impact that Mountain Ed made on my schools. In White County, we were fortunate enough to be able to get our graduation rate around 95% in a time when that was not common. And it was because we were partnering with Mountain Ed to find solutions for kids. And I understand the importance of the dollar conversation. I truly do. And so I'm not disregarding that at all. But in Tift County, our anchor statement is relentlessly pursuing a culture of excellence. And the way we talk about excellence is how we find ways to find success for every single child. Our nation decided that compulsory education was important and that we were going to do that as a country because we wanted an educated electorate, which is an important thing for me. Right around the time I was coming into the education business, No Child Left Behind came along, and it completely redefined the way we thought about education, all with one simple word: all. Because we've always been told we need to teach kids and educate kids, but we were never told we needed to get all of them. That word all is so crucial to this conversation. So crucial to this conversation. In Gilmer County, I saw the success of a lot of children that would not have been able to find success. And I know we're talking about serving our kids, and we are committed as a school system to serve all of our kids. The problem is that there are a lot of our kids that don't want to be served by us. That's an issue. They want to drop out. They want to quit. They want to move on. They want to do all of those things, and I understand it. And what is that next solution? Of course, we can encourage a GED, but we all know that a GED is not the same thing as a high school diploma. I value a high school diploma. I know all of you value a high school diploma. So how do we make that happen? I want to make sure that I tell a story that I tell all the time about mountain education that does not, it's not something that I as a school superintendent or as a school system could have achieved. While I was the principal in Gilmer County, I hired a science teacher. He came on and taught for me for a year. And as I got to know him, he had graduated and had all the credentials that he needed. He told me that he graduated from Mountain Ed. And at his age, Mountain Ed wasn't around in order for him to have graduated from Mountain Ed. So I started asking questions, and he quit school his senior year. He's from Lumpkin County, quit school his senior year, and went to work for his father in his record business. And when he had his children of his own, his two daughters were asking him, when he graduated from high school and that sort of stuff. And through that conversation, he made a commitment to them that he was going to go back and get his high school diploma. If mountain education had not been around, he would not have been able to get his high school diploma. He would have had to get his GED and possibly been able to go on to college and that sort of stuff. But a high school diploma wouldn't have been an option. As Dr. Price talks about, there's a lot of these kids being served in these programs that we're not capable of serving. I don't want a 27-year-old man sitting in a sophomore classroom. That's not something I want. But these programs are uniquely designed to be able to serve all people. Now, that's not to say that local systems couldn't chip in and find the financial means to be able to do some of this. There's no doubt about that. We absolutely can. In Tifton, we believe in trying to push innovative educational experiences as much as possible. And we have started a TIFT Academy. That is a night school that is modeled very similarly to a lot of these programs, but it still doesn't allow us to get all people. It allows us to get some of those that are going to drop out or that have children or for whatever reason can't make it to a traditional day, but it doesn't allow us to get everybody. And what I really want to make sure that I make a point, and I will talk a little bit faster, I know, is that tools are important for us. And sometimes it requires a backhoe, and you can dig a big hole with a backhoe. Sometimes you need a shovel. And I do think that these charter systems are the shovel that's needed in order to get those final students to the finish line. It's not just about providing education. If people come get it, they come get it. The wraparound services that are provided by a lot of these programs is a lot more in detail and more in depth than we're able to provide with the number of students that we have. So I wanted to make sure that I shared all of that. And wanted to tell that story most importantly. But I want to leave you with this. While we've been able to push our students to graduate, we would love to be able to have this resource in Tifton at our disposal. However the funding works out, we're willing to come to the table and talk about that so that we can reach all of those students that are falling through the cracks. Because I can tell you in Tifton, every single student matters. All of them, like we're destined to do. So thank you.
So Dr. Hathaway, if I could ask you the same question that I asked Dr. Price. I mean, is this, I hear you talk about the value. I hear that you have your own TIFT Academy, but this is a resource that helps to fill in that gap, serve that undermet population that you can't serve. I mean, is this something that you believe in enough that you would consider offering funding from your school district for your students inside this Coastal Plains model?
In a perfect world, it would be, but to her point, as we're looking at GNET's funding being cut and all of those other programs that are being cut, and we're trying to build buildings and facilities for those, GNET's is going to come before this program.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Pro Tem.
I just had a question. I liked what you said about No Child Left Behind. I felt the same way, that it for once disaggregated it and it showed that every child matters, not in the sum, but individually. Now, when you mention all people, Georgia doesn't pay for students over the age of 21. You mean up to age 21. I mean, we don't pay for high school QBE over the age of 21. I'm assuming here either, right? Is that correct?
Sure.
We do pay for over 21? Oh, right, we do not. So it would be all students up to the age of 21 without special needs, 22 if they have special needs. But I hear what you're saying about your school. I mean, your schools can't serve everybody with, certain different needs. So would you have been interested in this program had it not been free?
I will say this, because ultimately it's not free. I'm a taxpayer in Georgia like everybody else. So I appreciate you guys being, thrifty with our money. I do appreciate that. But I will say that
free to your school system.
Sure. When I was in White County, the model was different and it changed over as we were incentivized to do. I've been a part of 3 charter systems. I was in White County when they wrote their initial charter. I was in Gilmer County when they wrote their initial charter. I was a superintendent in Sly County when we made a decision to go strategic waiver, and Tifton is a charter system. So I've been through all of those iterations of us reorganizing in order to meet those needs.
And of course, they're distinct in that in all of those instances, you still paid your you still levied a property tax and you collected property tax revenues, and partnered with the state, right, for QBE to fund the students. In this case, that's not been the case. There was no partnership with the local school system other than governance, which is frankly unprecedented in Georgia. But I guess back to my question, would this have interested you in serving all students in your school system had you had to kick in some amount of local funding in a partnership with the state for QBE?
And in all due respect, we would be providing the buildings and the electricity and the technology and all of those pieces
Right.
To provide for it. So there would be a cost to the local system.
Just as there
A
would be for your
proportional
regular
cost.
student, just as there
Correct.
is for your, I mean, you do that now with your other students.
It would be a little bit more because this is a night program and that sort of stuff, but a minimal amount. I understand what you're saying, but there is a cost to the local system.
Right. So would you have been interested had you had to pay some local funding outside of facilities which you already supply to students?
It would depend on what the funding costs would be to make that happen. Obviously, with a charter system like theirs,
Of
there
course,
is a
These are
cost.
actually not charter systems. These are they were
Charter,
commissioned
yes.
charter schools. Now they're state special school, but it's a state charter school is what it is.
I would argue that there is local payment going into those in that partnership, in that agreement.
Well, I would just extrapolate that would be like the state taking over the funding for all the students in Tift County, except for you levying the property tax to just supply the limited number of things that you mentioned that you would be kicking in if you participate in coastal. And that's not the way the funding works in Georgia, right? I mean, that's why you have a property tax. You pay, I mean, generally it's about a 50-50 split, but of course, are you a charter system or are you a
We're a
strategic?
charter system.
Your
yes,
charter
ma'am.
system. You get to decide how much you fund. But I guess I am going to conclude you would not have been
To
interested.
answer your question, possibly.
You possibly would. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Wade.
So I'm going to come at the question kind of from a different perspective. So I definitely want to clear up one thing. I can assure you that not one member up here believes that there are any enemies in this room. We're all advocates for children. We're all trying to find a solution. And, I like, I've only got a few more months of this, so I'm still a freshman. So there's history that I don't know from this legislative body. And frankly, it doesn't matter to me. I want to find a solution for kids. So my question is let's look at it from this perspective. As superintendents, board members, advocates for children, if this type program were to allow you as a superintendent to say, okay, the state portion of QBE for these students is going to go to each of these organizations and their perspective. And let's allow one of the favorite, I love this because this is something that I'm working on another policy that's probably going to take 10 years to even accomplish if it has a chance. But the statewide enrollment zone removes student access barriers. I completely agree. So if all of you had that, and the state says, you know what, we're going to meet the commitment that we do for all students, and we're going to fund the QBE portion per child. Adults go figure out the rest. Are you, as superintendent, going to make a decision to support Coastal Plains? Your board going to figure out a way to do that?
I'm going to be committed and my board's going to be committed to finding solutions for students all the time.
Okay. So
Without question.
to me, that's, I think, a place that, in my mind, makes sense. Now, as a local school board member, I think that there's a competition that you can get into where we as a local board may say, you know what, we want to share because of these students, their specific needs. We might say, and I'm throwing out numbers that are made up. I'm not suggesting this is policy. This is Will Wade's personal opinion as a taxpayer. Maybe the school board says, you know what, we're going to fund an additional $250 per student, and we're going to provide these buildings, the electricity. But I also heard a presentation where the funding that it is currently being received is actually reimbursing the school for facility use under their maintenance and operation. So it actually isn't an expense locally in that setting for that. I think that's what Mountain Ed presented. Now, there may be portions that are shared facility use and they're not doing 100% reimbursement. They're just doing a flat rate. So I know there's probably nuance there, but ultimately, to me, that seems like a way to, you're providing the building, you're providing this, maybe you don't charge rental space, and each local system can decide, hey, our board, our superintendents, because the superintendents are the board members. Y'all can sit around and say, okay, what's our funding gap? Well, I mean, no offense. It's 23% administrative cost seems a bit high to me. And that's not disrespectful to any of the professionals in the room. My bank doesn't have 23%. I know they think bank, executives make a lot, not in community banking, I can tell you. And my school boards have told me they range from 5 to 7% of administrative costs. That's assistant principals and up, system-wide. There's a pretty big difference between 7 and 23. I think yours is about 17% in the foothills. So I don't know what that right number is. There's a lot of groups that can figure it out. But to me, is that a reasonable place to land for this to continue? Because I don't think anybody's trying to prevent this from existing to meet kids' needs. I didn't hear that today. I don't think that's what anybody's advocating for. So I'd love to hear from each of the other two main speakers, if y'all want to answer that question, because I think that's important to know.
Well, and I certainly want to give you time to finish your presentation. I don't want to ignore Representative Wade's question. And Dr. Hathaway, I appreciate you answering that. And I appreciate your commitment to the word all. And I think that's where we are here as well. So to our next speaker.
Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for letting us be here. I'm gonna be very brief. I want to make 2 points. I'm Richard Smith. I'm the Executive Director of First District RESA, headquartered in Brooklet, Georgia. We serve all of southeastern Georgia. I was the superintendent in Toombs County when Coastal Plains was formed, and we were part of that. So I've been around since they started this. 2 things I want to speak to you. We at Coastal Plains, we have 15 different sites, and we serve students from 81 different school districts throughout the state. To speak to your point, Representative, I like the idea that you're talking about. Let the state figure out what they can fund. If it's the same thing they fund for other students, then so be it. And then let us figure out, is that work? Will that work for every one of those 81 districts? I don't know. Like somebody spoke earlier, you can't speak for, Dr. Price said she can't speak for other boards or other districts. They'd have to make that decision. The second point I want to make is I spent a good deal of my career as a high school principal, and I think sometimes high school students simply outgrow high school as we traditionally know it, and as we found success in that environment. This is a choice for those students who have outgrown that atmosphere, and allows them to finish their career and finish their high school. And I just ask that we as adults work together to find some solution to make sure that this continues to work. So
thank you very much for that. I know it's not your fault that we're squeezed on time, but
I'll be very brief.
No, you're fine.
You have this presentation in front of you. I'm not going to read it to you, but there are a few things that I do want you to look at. One of the things, this is true for all 3 of us. We're all Cognia accredited. We've all been through the NCAA clearinghouse, and all our sites are Georgia accredited. The next slide, you had asked for capacity. This is based on the State Charter School Commission enrollment projections. You asked for the students that we serve, and you see the percentage for Coastal Plains and also for the state. The next slide. Oop, went all the way back. I will keep on talking. The next slide shows that the students that we serve, 64% of them are behind their cohort. And if you look by the classes of 23, 24, and 25, you see the percents. Staffing, our student-teacher ratio is 8-to-1. We have 18 full-time employees. And 14 of those are the registrars at our sites. We have 5 in the central office. We have 600, a little over 600 certified staff. 13% of our staff are retirees. Dual enrollment, I won't go through all that. I will say this, we have 21 students in option B. We have a lot of partners with our dual enrollment, just not for option B, but for our students as well. I will try not to mess this up again. There are 2 maps in your packet, and the second one is a little bit larger. These are all the districts that we serve. This does not include anybody from a virtual school, from out of state, or from Mountain Ed or Foothills. And if you look at that, all those colors, that's broad. So when you look at a statewide attendance zone, that does matter. And then you looked at our facilities. We have 18 partner districts, 15 sites. We serve 81 districts, 142 schools throughout Georgia. And you have an attachment in your packet. That's the physical address of all our sites. We do not own any of our sites. Our central office, we lease. Then you have our board. When we first started out, we had a board of all the participating districts. And we cut back from 14 to 5, and each of those will represent a region. And you asked for our budget overview, and we've been good stewards of our money. One of the things that we wanted to do was expand, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Behind that, you have the breakdown of our budget, then our fund balance history, which we are the baby of all 3 in the network, CARES funding, and behind that CARES funding in your packet, if you unfold that, you can see what we've spent our CARES money on, and we'll continue to spend it on. And I'm trying to make up for lost time.
You're doing a great job.
Then you also have a map that's divided by RESA districts. We serve 6 different RESA districts. And when you look at the first district, RESA, that runs from South Carolina all the way to Florida. That's a large area. But we've broken up in regions, and we have staff in each region that serves the different districts. And in our strategic plan, our plan is eventually to break part of the Southwest Georgia off. And you see the districts that we serve. Again, that's important on a statewide attendance zone. And one of the concerns that we've heard, we don't serve Southwest Georgia. If you look at the map, well, we'll go to the very last slide. We have 7 systems that their boards have approved Coastal Plains coming to their area, and those are the ones in black. You see the different RESAs that we're in, the systems that we currently serve, and then the ones that boards have already approved, like in Tifton. Their board approved that in 2020. And that is it. I tried to be very short and brief for you.
Thank you, sir. And to everyone here today, thank you for this kind of supplemental material. This is very, very helpful, and especially to have that in front of us. So anything else? Any questions or anything from the committee? Okay. Thank you all for taking time to be here. Okay. Okay. Thank y'all again very much for being here. We appreciate the presentations. I've got a number of questions to the 3 superintendents that if I could just, from a data standpoint, just circle back with the 3 of you. So as always, if you'll look for my email here before the week's out, just asking for a couple of more points. And again, Dr. Price, we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. We'll stand adjourned.